7 months after divorce, the single dad saw his ex pregnant. What he did next made everyone cry. 7 months after the divorce, Jan had finally started pretending he was okay. Not healed, not happy, just functioning. The house that once echoed with arguments now carried a quieter sound. The tiny footsteps of his 5-year-old daughter. Mia, every morning he woke before sunrise, packed her lunch with careful hands, struggled to braid her hair the way her mother used to, and forced a smile when she asked questions he wasn't ready to answer. The silence in the evenings was the hardest. After putting Meher to bed, he would sit alone on the couch, staring at the wall where their wedding photo once hung. He had removed it the day the divorce papers were signed, telling himself it was strength, not heartbreak. The divorce had been fast, fueled by anger and pride. Words were thrown like knives. Accusations were made without proof. Zara had tried to speak that last week, tried to say something important, but he had been too hurt to listen. When she walked out, he let her. When the papers came, he signed them without rereading. He told everyone he felt relieved. Inside, he felt hollow. That rainy evening, he had only stepped into the pharmacy because Meher had a slight fever. He was distracted, checking his phone for her temperature updates from the babysitter, when he sensed a familiar presence. He looked up and time froze. Zara stood near the counter, her hand resting protectively on a visibly pregnant belly. The world around him blurred. The fluorescent lights felt too bright. His chest tightened so suddenly he thought he might collapse. 7 months! They had been divorced for 7 months. His mind raced with impossible calculations, with suspicion, with disbelief. But when he truly looked at her, none of that mattered for a moment. She looked tired. Her face was pale, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying more than just the weight of a child. There was no joy in her expression, no protective partner beside her. She was alone. Their eyes met. For a second, the anger he thought he still carried dissolved into something more complicated: regret, confusion, pain. She seemed startled, almost frightened, and quickly looked down at the floor. Her fingers tightened around the prescription slip in her hand. He wanted to ask questions, 1,000 of them. Whose child? Why didn't you tell me? Were you already? But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he turned and walked out into the rain. The cold air hit his face, but it didn't clear his mind. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. He had convinced himself that chapter was closed, that the story had ended with signatures and silence. Yet seeing her like that reopened everything he had tried so hard to bury. And as the rain blurred his windshield, one thought echoed louder than the rest. Why did she look so alone? Jan didn't waste another day. After that phone call, something inside him shifted. The anger he had carried for months suddenly felt childish compared to the reality she had been facing alone. He asked around quietly and finally learned from an old colleague that Zara had been seen visiting a small clinic across town, without overthinking, his heart pounding harder with every red light he crossed. The clinic was modest, its paint slightly faded. He scanned the room nervously until he saw her sitting in the corner, one hand resting on her stomach, the other holding a medical file tightly against her chest. She looked smaller somehow, like life had pressed her down. When she noticed him standing there, her eyes widened in shock. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy with everything unsaid over the past 7 months. He sat beside her, leaving a careful space between them. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in months. A bitter smile touched her lips. "When?" she whispered. "The day you said you didn't care. Or the day you told me to leave." Her words hit him harder than any accusation. He remembered his own voice that night, cold, sharp, final. "I found out a week before the divorce was finalized," she continued. "I tried to tell you, but you were already gone even before I packed my bags." He swallowed, guilt tightening his chest. "You should have still told me." She looked at him then, tears filling her eyes, but refusing to fall. "I didn't want you to think I was trying to trap you. I didn't want pity. I thought I could handle it. But you're not supposed to handle it alone." he said, his voice breaking slightly. She laughed softly, a fragile sound. That's the thing about divorce, Ayan. Once it's done, you're alone. People choose sides. My parents said I embarrassed them. Your family doesn't even answer my calls. I work double shifts. I save every rupee. I skip meals sometimes, but I manage. The image of her skipping meals while carrying his child made his hands tremble. He looked down at her swollen feet, at the way she shifted uncomfortably in the plastic chair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his house keys. He held them out to her. Come home, he said. She stared at the keys as if they were something unreal. What? Not as my wife, he clarified quickly. I'm not asking for that. But as the mother of my child. As someone who shouldn't be struggling like this. You won't do this alone anymore. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. People will talk, she whispered. They already do, he replied calmly. Let them. I care about my children more than their opinions. For the first time in months, the wall between them cracked, not because of romance, but because of responsibility. And as she slowly reached for the keys with trembling fingers, both of them knew this decision would change everything. The months that followed were not easy, but they were different. Zara moved back into the house quietly, almost cautiously, as if afraid the walls might reject her. Ayan prepared the guest room for her, making sure everything was comfortable but respectful. They lived like careful roommates at first, speaking mostly about practical things, doctor appointments, groceries, Maya's school schedule. There were no late-night arguments anymore, but there were no soft confessions either, just a fragile understanding that they were rebuilding something that had once shattered. Meha was the first to erase the awkwardness. The day Zara walked in with her small suitcase, their daughter ran into her arms and cried, so hard that even Ayan had to look away to hide his tears. From that moment, the house felt warmer. Laughter returned slowly. Meha would sit between them during dinner. As Zara's due date approached, her movements became slower. Some nights Ayan would hear her pacing the hallway, unable to sleep because of discomfort. Without saying much, he would bring her a glass of water. Then one stormy night everything changed. Zara felt a sharp pain that doubled her over in the kitchen. The glass she was holding slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Ayan rushed in, panic flooding his face. It's time, she whispered, gripping the edge of the counter. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Rain hammered against the windshield as Ayan held the steering wheel tightly, glancing at her every few seconds. She squeezed his hand during contractions, and this time he didn't pull away. He stayed, fully present. Hours later, the cry of a newborn filled the delivery room. The sound was fragile, yet powerful enough to break every wall that still stood between them. Ayan felt his knees weaken as the nurse placed a tiny baby boy in his arms. He stared at his son's small fingers. He looked at her, then at the baby. Yes, he replied, I did. He's my son, and you're the mother of my children. That doesn't disappear with a signature. Later that night, when the room was quiet and their son slept peacefully beside them, Ayan pulled a chair close to her bed. I don't know what we'll become, he admitted honestly, but I know one thing. You will never feel alone again. Not while I'm here. Zara's tears fell silently, not from sadness, but from relief. It wasn't a dramatic reunion. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. It was something deeper, two people choosing responsibility over pride, compassion over ego. When they brought the baby home, Meher walked beside them proudly, holding her father's hand while smiling at her mother. Neighbors who once whispered now watched quietly. And as Ayan stepped into the house carrying his newborn son, he understood something important. Sometimes love doesn't return in the form of passion. Sometimes it returns as protection, forgiveness, and the courage to stand beside someone when it would be easier to walk away.